I'm Stephen Walker, a parent, and work with Prudential Georgia Realty as a realtor of our community. In all of your experience from state to state, what do you describe as a school board member? What do you see as a person who fits that definition of being a good board member?
The number one criteria in my mind is a focus on what's best for kids. And you know, we can have a lot of discourse about how we get there, but if the number one priority of a board member is to do what's best for children, you can work out those differences. And I give this example from time to time. When I was superintendent in Southern Maine, I had a 6-member board that I worked with. And there were 2 members on that board. One I would describe as Tea Party conservative, as right can get. Another board member I would describe as Kennedy liberal, as left could get. These 2 board members worked very well together. They put politics aside. They focused. They never agreed politically, but we didn't get into political conversations. We talked about what are we doing for children. And while they may have disagreed on how to get there, the goal was the same for both of them. It's what's best for kids. And if we're not focused on that, I'm not sure why you're even running for school board, because that should be your number one priority. Number 2, you have to agree to disagree. You have to be able to have civil discourse, and you have to be able to speak your opinion. You need to be able to back up your opinion, hopefully with facts and data. And then the board has to make a decision. And I would argue once that decision's made, then you support your fellow board members. You don't work to undermine what was decided. You work to support and move forward. And that's what we teach our children too. We teach our children in school all the time to, seek to understand first before being understood. And I think we need to make sure we put those priorities in the right order. We need to listen to others. We need to understand their perspective. We need to make our case. We need to vote on the issue, and then we need to move on.
I'm Angelina Rayner, a representative from Fayette Middle School. You mentioned that there was a possible land purchase deal going on, and that's pushing our decision for school closures and everything back to February. And I'd like a little more clarification about the timeline. Is that the committee redistricting February, the school closure decision February? What's supposed to be happening in what time frame?
Well, I hope we know for sure in the next 3 to 4 weeks whether or not this property land transaction is going to take place. Because if we do, then we can reconvene the committee and be very clear about what their responsibility will be over the next few weeks. They have done a lot of work over the last couple months, and I think they are poised to complete the work in a fairly short period of time once they know exactly the parameters they're working with. But again, my goal is I think this needs to be wrapped up no later than February vacation. And the reason I'm using that as a target date, number 1, we need to inform parents where their children will be going to school the following year. That's critical. Number 2, as you can imagine, we have a lot of employees very anxious to know what we're doing and where they will be moved, and we have to work through all of that human resource issue as well. Once the committee finishes their work, then the school board must have 2 public hearings, and we will need to have that in a very large venue to make sure we accommodate hundreds, maybe even up to 1,000 people, and allow people to speak on the 2 plans that are out there, and then the board votes. But I do want to make clear on this issue, in terms of boundaries, the board can change boundaries anytime they want to. That doesn't have to have a public hearing. They have to have the public hearing around school closures, not necessarily boundaries. But the committee is working on boundaries, and hopefully, again, that work can be wrapped up in fairly short order once we know whether or not this transaction is going to happen. In the transaction, I wish I could tell you more, but I can't. We certainly don't want to jeopardize the possibility, but I will say this. It's very exciting, not only with the possibility of bringing in some much-needed revenue to help pay off some debt, but also, if this happens, it will create opportunities for our students that we currently do not have. and it's educational in nature as well, I will tell you that much. And that's one of the pieces that's kind of exciting to me.
Hi, my name's Nicole Harris.
Hi,
I'm
Nicole.
from Fayette Middle. How are you? I don't know if you answered the question for me. I'm wondering, so are you saying that the vote will be in February to decide if the schools will close?
Again, that's going to be my recommendation, that the vote take place prior to February vacation so that all those other things we can put in place. Figuring out, again, parents need to know where the children are going to school, and employees need to know where they're going to be working.
And Dr. Bearden, Emery
morning.
Wilkerson, Fayette Middle School and Fayette High School. 2 questions for you. Number one, if the problem with schools is a lack of revenue, why have there not been conversations between the school superintendent and the board about how we can develop new streams of revenue? Because the biggest concern that I have as a parent is most of us came to the school system or grew up in the area and stayed in the school system because of the quality of instruction, because of the programs. If we start to cut into the quality, into the programs, we don't have the system which we came here for. So if we need more revenue, why haven't we had that conversation?
Yeah. Well, we're very limited on what we can do in terms of revenue, but we are having one critical conversation right now that could be a revenue generator, and that is, are we ready to allow the possibility of tuition-paying students to come to Fayette County schools? As you know, we have a lot of empty seats throughout Fayette County. We also have folks who live in surrounding counties that would really like to have their children attend our school system, but because they don't live here, they can't attend our school system. But those families would probably be willing to pay tuition to allow their children to come to Fayette County schools. And the way that becomes a revenue generator, number one, the board has to decide how much they're going to charge for tuition. And that's a debate that'll happen after they vote, if they do decide to allow tuition students. Marietta City Schools, for example, charges right around $3,500 for tuition students, and they have over 200. Their school system is much smaller than us. I think they're around 7,000 kids. We're a little more than 20,000. And so they bring that additional revenue into Marietta City, and we went and visited with them to look at their tuition policy, how it worked. What the superintendent in Marietta City told us, and I wasn't surprised by this, she said, number one, what you typically get are really high-achieving kids. And you get parents who are very vested in their child's education, that they have had 0 issues with children coming into their school system that weren't academically prepared to meet their standards or were behaving in such a way that didn't fall within their code of conduct. The way our proposed tuition policy is written is we can certainly remove kids if they do not meet our academic standards and do not meet our behavioral standards, but the reality in talking to other superintendents, those aren't the types of kids you get. So you get the money that parents would pay for tuition, and on top of that, you also get your money from the state, which is about $4,000 per student. And you could allow tuition students and really not increase any costs whatsoever, because we have, again, lots of room to grow. I mean, you could probably add several hundred students, and you may not have to add any employees whatsoever. You might have to buy some additional textbooks and things like that, but the revenue would far exceed the expenditures. Outside of that, there are really limited opportunities for a school system in generating revenue other than local property tax dollars or East Blast.
Hi, I'm Jan Shikfa. I'm with Tyrone Elementary and the Complete Insurance Source. You mentioned earlier that class sizes will need to increase. Can you give an average, what the class size percentage-wise that you think that it's going to increase? And 2, I know you can't share very many details about the land property transaction, but do you think that that transaction will eliminate the need to close schools?
Well, the first one about class sizes, number one, I think they will increase. If I were to put a number on it, I would say from grade 4 or 5 and beyond, maybe by 3 or 4 kids per class. The research is evident. lower class sizes are most effective in the lower grades where children are learning the fundamentals and they need that very much. They need that individual instruction, especially in the area of reading. And so I certainly would not be recommending that class sizes go up in grades K1, 2, and 3 because the research doesn't support that. What research does support is that academic achievement does not vary very much based on class size. The key component is the classroom teacher. And as I talked about the teacher earlier who actually teaches at Booth Middle School, he's a great example of that. There's no doubt in my mind if he had a class of 30 kids, for example, and he even says, it's not just me saying it, he's saying it as well, he doesn't believe that would be an issue for him because of technology and his ability to differentiate instruction. He thinks he could handle a few more kids. It's not going to increase dramatically, but we will be more in line with other school systems in the state of Georgia. A lot of systems in the state with middle school and high school have classes that are well above 30. We're not anywhere near that in Fayette County. Our class sizes have always been really, really small. But again, teacher salaries and benefits are the biggest part of our budget. You cannot make up a $15 million gap without cutting into that particular resource. And the other thing I would add is if you look at the state funding formula, we employ far more teachers, guidance counselors, and assistant principals than we get funded for. And when I met with the Scott Austinson, who's the deputy superintendent for the state of Georgia, and we were looking at our finances, and I met with him earlier this fall, he said, Jeff, the first thing that has to happen in Fayette County, obviously as I look at this data, is you guys need to be more in line with the funding formula. It's great that, and Scott lives in our community, he has children that goes to school here. He said it's great that for years Fayette County's always had the ability to have really low class sizes, but you're an anomaly. I mean, this is not the way it is throughout the rest of the state, and you're going to have to look at making those cuts. Newton County, Georgia is a great example. Newton County employs about 160 less certified people, teachers and principals, than they are funded for, less. We are just the opposite. We have about 150, 160 more than we're funded for. So we have to get more in line with the funding formula. The second piece of your question was about and specifically
is the property land sale of such significance that we
okay, that's an opinion question. In my opinion, no. Her question was, if we were to sell that, would that mean we would not have to close any schools? If I were remaining as your superintendent, I would still be recommending probably at least 2 school closures. But I will not be after January. That'll be someone else's call. But I think, again, we are so far under capacity. And granted, it doesn't save a lot of money. I think that word's out there. We're talking about $800,000 a school. But it does make a difference. And you have to think about it, not only $800,000 this year, but that's every year that you're paying for overhead that you may not necessarily need. But I want to follow up on the school closure thing. And I think many of you have heard me say this. I would never, ever recommend closing schools and mothballing facilities. Never. That's disastrous for a community. It's terrible for neighborhoods. I would recommend you only do that if you have a plan to repurpose that. And Emery, you talked about generating revenue. That is one way we can generate revenue. We have a lot of colleges and universities who pay rent for our facilities now. And, they like to have their own space. I can foresee some of these unused schools, we could use that for rental space and generate some revenue in Fayette County schools.
With everything that has been said here this morning, with this being the state of schools, I understand that the land acquisition is a very important part of this. However, how does your departure, the lack of leadership, what role does that play in all the decisions that will take place over the next few months? I know that there were 2 plans on the table. What will happen to those plans? Will that be put on the shelf pending new leadership coming in? What role does that play in all of this? I think that's worthy of being addressed because that's a part of the state of the schools.
I wish I could answer that with 100% certainty. I can only tell you between now and the time I leave that I will be making recommendations based on what I feel is in the best interest of the school system. That does not mean that the school board come January or a new superintendent is going to necessarily agree with that, and obviously that could change. That is reality. I will say this, the board is very informed on this possible land property transaction, and while we have not had any discussions about are you in favor or not in favor, we're really in the information gathering stage right now. I think it is a proposal that absolutely has to be considered just because of the magnitude of the proposal. And we're not just talking about land, we're talking about a piece of property that we own as well, a school building that we own as well. And so it's that significant, not only for the possibility of generating some much needed revenue, but also, like I said earlier, if this particular proposal happens, there would be additional opportunities for students that I think would make Fayette even more desirable than it is now, a very unique opportunities for kids. And I think that's exciting. And I wish I could talk more about that, but I don't want to do anything to jeopardize the negotiations we're currently having with this particular entity, because it really does need to remain confidential at this time. But I will tell you, if I were remaining as your superintendent and this happened, it would be very exciting. Yes. This is the last one, okay.
My name is Chris Wilson. I'm with Bennett's Mill Middle School.
Hi, Chris.
Hey, I wanted to ask, with the short time frame on the closure, do you really feel that you're giving teachers who are currently employed enough time to find another position? Are they going to have to move out of the county? How many teachers are going to be displaced? And then back to the issue of having vouchers come into the county, which I think is great to have extra revenue, but there are lots of Fayette County residents who don't get to go to the school that they would like to go to because of redistricting lines and things like that. And so how do you approach that issue as far as you're allowing students to come out of the county into a school that they want to go to, but students that are in the county can't go to where they would like?
Yeah. Well, number one, the way the tuition policy will be written, the parents aren't going to have a choice. It'll be where we have space. For example, if you were coming to us from Fulton County paying tuition, you wouldn't say, well, I want my child to go to Stars Mill High School. It would be, we have space available at this school. If you want to pay tuition for your child to come to Fayette County schools, they're going to go to this school. And you're going to provide transportation, and that's your only choice. And if you don't want that, then your child's not going to come to Fayette County schools. So that'll be a decision that we make, not parents coming into Fayette County, not decisions they will make.
Who makes that decision?
Well, the way the policy will be written, it'll be a function of administration. At the county level, yeah. Right now we have, registration at the Welcome Center. So, I would foresee someone coming in, they're paying tuition, and we say, well, they come to us and say, my child is in high school, my child's in grade 9, I want my child to go to Fayette County schools. And we would say, okay, here's the tuition amount, and here's the school where we have a vacancy. And we're not going to negotiate with that. Here's your choice.
Because we're going to have that because we live next to the worst county in the United States of America. They lost their accreditation once and they lose it again. So those students are going to be the ones who are going to want the voucher. So that's where there's a very sincere conversation.
I understand that, but I would also agree with what I heard from other superintendents. Those kids coming from that county or other counties are going to be kind of the cream of the crop. They're going to be the high flyers and kids, parents who are very engaged in their child's education. And if they're not, we may not let them in because there's going to be standards that they have to meet before. They can't be having a discipline issue at their current school. They're not coming here. They can't be failing at their school. They're not coming here. And if they do come here and they cause a discipline issue, they're leaving. If they come here and they don't meet our academic standards, they're leaving. And we're going to be really clear about that up front. And like I said, I don't think those are the kids we'll get. I think we'll get the highly motivated kids with highly motivated parents who have the means to pay tuition. To your question about employees, number one, I hope we can do most, if not all of this, through attrition. We turn over 200 to 250 employees every year. We're a pretty big organization. We employ about 3,000 people. And when I say turn over 200 to 250, that includes in all job categories. So there is a possibility we can do most of this based on retirements and resignations. And yes, that will give our Human Resources Department time to place people. The state doesn't allow you to do it. If you have a reduction in force, you can't do it solely on seniority. And that's a good thing. It really does need to be performance-based. And so if we have a very young teacher who's a dynamic teacher and we really want to keep them, we're going to keep them. If we have a veteran teacher who is not performing up to expectations, that is the person that might lose their job in a reduction in force. And so we're making sure we write those types of policies and regulations to meet the needs of our kids, not necessarily, and I hate to say it this way, but it's reality, we're not here to necessarily meet the needs of our employees and what their desires are. Our first responsibility is to meet the needs of our kids. And then, of course, we obviously want your employees to be happy and to be working where they want to work and things like that, but that's not our number one focus. Our number one focus is what's best for kids. Well, typically we don't issue contracts till the spring of the year, so I still think that same timeline will fall into place. By state law, we have to do it by May 15th. So we would meet that. I mean, if we knew by February vacation, the board has decided, here are the schools that are going to close, this is how many employees we're going to reduce, and at the February board meeting, we typically do allocations anyway. You know, the school has this many kids, so we need this many teachers, so forth and so on. And that's when we start working on staffing. So that still gives us about 3 months to make those staffing decisions, which is plenty of time. Yeah, and it happens every year anyway. No. It'll be countywide, absolutely. Well, I know that wraps up all the time we have. Thank you very much again for being here this morning, and thank you for being such an attentive audience. I've really enjoyed being here with you today. And once again, I wish Fayette County nothing but the very best. Thank you.